Season 4. This episode is entitled Weeds Don't Ask for Permission. Have you ever noticed that weeds never ask permission before just showing up out of nowhere? I think about the weeds in my mom's front yard, the backyard, and interesting enough, weeds that show up in concrete, like in a big city. Like those weeds are like extra, extra tough. And how they just show up. Nobody plants them, nobody invites them, nobody waters them, nobody puts them on a vision board, nobody writes goals about growing them. Yet somehow there they are, taking up space, competing for resources, stealing sunlight, stealing water, stealing nutrients that were intended for something or someone else. And the longer they remain, the harder they become to remove. They take over your yard, they take over the space, which made me wonder, what in my life have I allowed to grow simply because I ignored it? A habit, a mindset, a frenemy that gossips, a distraction, a resentment, a fear, a relationship, a friendship, a frenemy again, a commitment. And as we continue walking the garden today, we're talking about weeds, distractions, and why what we ignore often continues to grow like weeds. They take over. Hey y'all, I am Madison Samone Chase, also known as Miss Chase. I was raised in church. My great grandmother played the piano, and if you knew me growing up, I actually sang in the choir at in my church when I was a little girl, and then maybe 7, 8 years ago, I also tried to do it again, and it was an epic fail. So I say all that to say that my faith journey has always been at the center of who I am. And I am incredibly thankful to have been raised by a hardworking, sacrificial, high performing single mother who remains my biggest fan and forever bestie, my BFF, my best friend for real. And honoring God through my service, making my mama proud, and using the gifts He gave me has always been deeply important to me. And over the past several seasons of Cut to the Chase at 8, now C2TC8, Her Circle, which stands for High Performing Empowered Women Who Are Ready to Thrive, and some men too, we've talked about awareness, detox, discernment, boundaries, rebuilding, No More Night series, and becoming. But as I entered this season 4, I found myself thinking less about what needed to be removed and more about what needed to be cultivated. Because before a gardener plants anything for the next season, the gardener walks the garden. The gardener takes inventory. The gardener notices what's flourishing. The gardener notices what struggled, notices what produced fruit. The gardener notices what never took root. The gardener notices what needs pruning, and the gardener notices what has completed its purpose. And that's what season 4 is all about, walking the garden and taking an honest look at people, places, and things in our lives. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with wisdom. Because every person, every place, and everything produces fruit. And before we ask for a bigger harvest, we may need to take a closer look at the roots. So, whether you're a high performing mother, single father, caretaker, entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, working a 9 to 5, juggling 2 or 3 jobs, quietly rebuilding, or simply trying to grow through life one season at a time, this space and this circle is for you. So if you're listening and or watching, I want you to pull up a real chair or a digital chair and grab yourself a cup of hot or cold herbal tea. And welcome to my cozy home of Cut to the Chase at 8, now C2TC8 Her Circle, for high performing, empowered women and some men who are ready to thrive. A 15-minute micro learning moment for macro living transformations. And I am truly overjoyed that you are here. Now let's take one breath together to open this episode. We're going to inhale for 3, 2, 1. We're going to exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One of the biggest misconceptions about gardens is that neglect creates neutrality. It doesn't. Neglect creates opportunity. Not necessarily opportunity for what we want, but opportunity nonetheless. Gardeners understand this. If a garden is left unattended long enough, something will grow. The problem is that it may not be what you wanted in that garden, what was intended. Weeds don't need permission. They don't need encouragement. They don't need accountability. They don't need a coach. They certainly don't need a support group. They simply grow where space allows them to grow. It could be a crack, like I mentioned, my recent visit to New York. I remember seeing a weed in concrete, especially around the busy streets of New York. Like, what kind of weed grows between concrete? But weeds, they simply grow where space allows them to grow. And life often works the same way. Resentment grows, bitterness grows, comparison grows, fear grows, anxiety grows, delusion can grow, procrastination can grow, distraction can grow, excuses can grow, avoidance can grow. And not because we intentionally cultivated them, but because we failed to address them. We failed spontaneous, assertive communication with them. And the challenge with weeds is that they often appear harmless at first. Small, unnoticeable, just one, a couple of weeds. They're easy to overlook. And sometimes those weeds look like grass. But over time, they begin competing with the things we're actually trying to grow. They consume energy, sunlight, resources, soil, attention, focus, resources, and eventually they make it harder for healthy things to flourish. The danger isn't always what's obvious. Sometimes the greatest threat to our growth is what we've become accustomed to seeing every single day. Which brings me to the PPT audit: people, places, and things. Who consistently contributes to drama, confusion, negativity, toxic distraction, or even wanting you to be their therapist and dumping on you? And every time you talk to them, it is sad, it's negativity, it is woe is me, or woe is my family, or woe is my friends. And who helps cultivate growth, wisdom, peace, and accountability, and abundance, and love, and joy, and laughter? And what relationships in our lives require attention? Places. What environments bring out the best in me? What environments consistently reinforce unhealthy habits, toxic thinking, toxic conversation, or unhealthy thinking? What spaces need reevaluation? Things. What habits have quietly taken root? What distractions continue to consume time, energy, and attention? What thought patterns have become normalized that no longer serve us? And what have I been tolerating instead of addressing? And addressing doesn't always mean you have to have a spontaneous, authentically assertive communication. Sometimes it means it's not worth addressing. Which brings me to the SAC challenge: spontaneous, authentic, assertive communication challenge is simple. Identify one weed we've been avoiding. What weed have you been avoiding? Not one you're planning to deal with someday. One you're willing to address this week, this moment, picking up the phone and dealing with it now. Not a text message, not a passive aggressive text message that you don't say. And then practice one act of spontaneous, authentically assertive communication. And maybe it sounds like this: this isn't serving me anymore. I really am going to make a change, like today, right now, this moment. I've been avoiding this conversation. I've outgrown this conversation. I've outgrown this relationship, this habit. I need help. Or perhaps the conversation is with yourself. And our goal is never perfection. The goal is honesty, authentic honesty, because weeds rarely disappear on their own. They don't disappear on their own. Eventually, they require action. And sometimes that action is serious, consistent. Like you got to dig up the weeds, you got to put weed killer. Like it is, once you have weeds, they spread like wildfire. And in order to get rid of them, you have to sometimes almost literally start over. Which brings me to the three keys. Key number one: not everything growing in your life belongs there. Growth alone does not determine value. Discernment does. And knowing the difference between growth of a healthy crop or growth of weeds. Key number two: what we tolerate today often becomes harder to remove tomorrow. Small, microscopic problems rarely stay small when ignored. Which brings me to key number three: awareness creates opportunity, action creates change. Recognizing the weed in people, places, and things is important. Removing it is transformational, and it must be done swiftly and consistently. Our one reflection question: what have I allowed to grow simply because I've been avoiding dealing with it? Today, we explored why weeds never ask for permission. They don't announce themselves. They don't request access politely. They simply grow wherever space allows. And all they need is just a little bit of space. They need to stick their little pinky toe in to get in. And sometimes the greatest act of stewardship isn't planting something new. It's removing what no longer belongs. And sometimes, in order to get rid of weeds, you have to set it on fire. So, this week, I want us to pay attention to what has quietly taken root: the habits, the distractions, the fears, the resentment, the anxiety, the excuses, and ask yourself, is this helping me grow, or is it competing with what I'm trying to cultivate? And not what you're trying to cultivate, but what are you cultivating? because every garden eventually reveals what has been receiving attention. Before we go, let's revisit today's three keys. Key number one, not everything growing in our life belongs there. Key number two, what we tolerate today often becomes harder to remove. Key number three, awareness creates opportunity, action creates change. And our reflection question, what have I allowed to grow simply because I've been avoiding dealing with it? Take that question with you this week. Sit with it, pray about it, journal about it, and see what comes to the surface. Remember, weeds don't become a problem overnight. They become a problem when they're left unattended. So continue giving yourself grace in this space. Take one closing breath with me. We're going to inhale for 3, 2, 1. We're going to exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If this episode pricked your heart or lit a spark, please subscribe and share this episode with someone you care about. And leave a comment so that this episode becomes a dialogue and not a monologue. And if you're listening from a different country, please send me a text message or a voicemail. I'd love to see and understand how you found me. And if you feel inclined, please leave a 5-star rating or review so that this space can continue to grow and serve others long after this episode ends. So until next time, I am Madison Samone Chase, and this has been another episode of Cut to the Chase at 8 C2TC8 Her Circle, which stands for high performing, empowered women who are ready to thrive. And some men too, so thank you. This is a 15-minute micro-learning moment for macro-living transformation. So blessings to you and yours until tomorrow. And remember, what you ignore doesn't disappear. It grows.